Lunar Remastered Collection. If you've watched my reviews over the years, you must be well aware of how much I love the Lunar series. Whenever I want to reference a great RPG series, I inevitably start talking about Lunar. I've been a fan of the series since it first came out on the Sega CD. Most people played it when it came to the Saturn. I can't even say that with a straight face. Most people played this when it came to the PlayStation 1. And honestly, it was the only reason I owned a PlayStation 1. My first experience with the series was renting it from my local Blockbuster and playing it on my Series 1 Sega CD. Most people think of this when they see the Sega CD, but I had the first version. It had a tray that would come out that you put the CD on, and I believe it had a slower reading speed. There were a lot of things I really loved about Lunar. The sense of humor, the characters, the way that even in the most dire situations, they still keep their sense of humor. Plus I loved the cartoon cutscenes. They were not as fluidly visual as they were in the remakes, but they did the job. Plus they added voices which made everything feel even more enjoyable. And it really pulled you into the game. The Sega CD version of Lunar 1 had a kick-ass opening animation that would play out. It had a load of spoilers for the game, and it would have made a lot more sense to put this in at the end, as a way of showing off what happened in the game. While I was waiting for Lunar 2 to come out, my Sega CD actually stopped reading discs reliably, so I had to buy the new version. I guess it was for the best because it was more dependable, and I believe it still works. I still have this and Lunar 2 packed away with some of my other games. I remember desperately waiting for Lunar 2 to come out. It kept getting delayed and delayed. I started bugging Working Designs over the phone. They're the company who published the game, and they offered me a demo tape of Lunar 2 to tide me over. I actually uploaded it to my channel last year. Funny enough, after that, a week later, they announced this re-release. When Lunar 2 came out, it had even better animations and more voice acting. However, unfortunately, it had some issues that the remakes would actually fix. Like the stupid decision by the publishers to add a punishment every time you saved. There was a separate experience system for magic, and you would have to spend experience points to save. And it was bull. This was not in the original Japanese release, but something they actually added in for the English release for some reason. The remakes actually got rid of all that. Now, the one thing most people who play the remakes don't know about the series is how hard it used to be. Sure, the remakes had some difficult fights, but the Sega CD version, they were often brutal in both games if you were not properly prepared. Lunar 2 had one of the worst boss fights in the series. I'm not going to spoil who it is, but it was just so frustrating. They completely changed it in the remake not to be so annoying. What was amazing was the amount of cutscenes and voices in the Lunar 2. There was over 50 minutes of them, and that might not sound impressive now, but back then it was jaw-dropping, and magically somehow they put it all on one CD, when the remake actually needed 3. After Lunar 2, they really didn't make any more games in the series, which was disappointing. There was kind of a sequel, but not really. I've never played it, mainly because it was never released to the US market. It was called Lunar Walking School. It was just a monster fighting game for the Game Gear. I think this series could use a new version. The way they focus on story more than fighting and have the fun, quirky characters could really be appealing for newer audiences who don't want a depressing world with gritty characters. However, I don't think the opportunity to get a true sequel is going to happen. Ugh, fine, we'll talk about it. Lunar Dragon Song. What can I say about it? Oh, I know. It's fucking awful. Most people try to forget this game exists. The story is boring. The experience system has a terrible gimmick where you have to choose if you want money or experience when you fight enemies, which basically means you have to fight twice as much in order to get money and level up your characters. You can't target enemies. The problem is certain enemies have different weaknesses that other characters might have an advantage to. But since you can't target them, you kind of have to wait until you get to them. Worse yet, you lose hit points if you decide to run around. That's right. If you decide not to just slowly walk around the world, the game would actually punish you. There's nothing in this title worth your time. Now let's get to the remasters, and I guess the actual review. And I'm sure some of my non-regular viewers are going to say, it's about time. My regular viewers are like, yeah, this is pretty common. I put a timestamp in so you don't have to hear me go into the history of the series. But I did want you to know my baggage with these games. They've cleaned up the cutscenes for the high-def TVs. It's not as blurry as it used to be. If you want to compare them, they have the original versions in here as well, with no visual changes. And it's in 4:3. But just trying it out for a couple seconds, you could tell it's not worth playing it that way. I will say I was a bit disappointed with these remastered versions. When you compare this with the Suikoden 1 and 2 remakes, which just came out a month earlier, those remakes actually look way better than their original games. Lunar 1 has some visual effects, which were more annoying than impressive. The caves would often have glows to them. It never made any sense to the world. Lunar 2 looks exactly the same. They didn't even put up those annoying glows on the caves. They just cleaned up the visuals. And that's really disappointing. They did change up the inventory system in both games to make it so so everyone could use from a pool of stuff instead of individual holding. It did feel like all the remaster love just went to Lunar 1. The battle system was pretty good, but even something as simple as auto battle was actually better in Lunar 1 as well. In Lunar 1, you could stop the characters from using magic in battle just by selecting it. In Lunar 2, they have two quick fight options: AI, which loved to use magic, and a tactics option, which you could do just attacks and no magic if you set it up. But you have to press down, click on it, then click on your tactic. It was a little easier with AI with just 2 button presses. But in Lunar 1, it's 1 button press and you could just auto fight. Why couldn't they use the same system in both games? Lunar 1 is about Alex, who wants to be a dragon master. He goes on a quest with his friends to the White Dragon Cave to see if he can find a diamond to sell, and it sets him on a grand adventure which might make his dreams come true. The first game is all about love, as all of the playable characters are paired up with each other. 2 magic users, a thief and the daughter of a hero, and your character and his sister. Okay, I know I'm gonna get comments about this, but it's true! Luna is Alex's sister! They're not related by blood, but his parents basically adopted her as a baby. They were raised together, and they fell for each other. And the father's actually encouraging it, as he said he always thought that Alex was gonna marry her one day. His dad was cool with him getting together with his sister. Yeah, it's a weird setup for a love story, but it's actually very compelling. You can feel the love between them. In the Sega CD version, she really didn't follow you on your adventure. She just stayed home waiting for you. When they remade the game, they basically remade the first third of the game, which was amazing that they did that. They realized their mistake in not including her and changed a great portion of the game. And I think it's terrific that they did that. If you want to know where it's wildly different from the Sega CD version, it's when Luna's running towards the boat. She stayed behind at that point. Lunar 2 takes place 1,000 years later, and it's about Hiro, who's a treasure hunter. He sees a light come down from a tower. He and his grandfather go to investigate. They find a girl named Lucia, and they have to avoid people who are trying to kill her because they think she's the destroyer of the world. There's a love story between Hiro and Lucia, and I find it a little less compelling, mainly because Hiro just sees this girl and is instantly in love for no reason. I wish there was more to their relationship than just a couple scenes. It needed more time between them. It kind of felt like they fell for each other because that's what the story needed. Now, she has no concept of the idea of love or friendship, and she has to learn it. And her journey to do that was great, but Hiro's emotions was always just him smitten, and he never expressed why he loved her, other than she's a purty girl. That being said, I think Lunar 2 has the better overall story. It has more twists and turns. One in particular was very surprising. The biggest complaint I had about Lunar 1 is that the whole overall story is so basic. At its core, it's about one guy trying to be a dragon master, and most of the game just dealing with that. Then other things happen. In the second game, you're also having to deal with all the dragons. But this time, Hiro isn't becoming a dragon master, and it takes him about a third of the time to do this. But why not make him one? He saw all the dragons. The one thing I'm going to say about the Lunar series is that it focuses more on story than exploring. A great deal of the places that you explore are fairly short. You might expect places to drag on since it's an RPG, and that's just something that happens. But this series really doesn't do that. Even climbing huge buildings is usually pretty fast, and has you dealing with small rooms. Only the later parts of each of these games kind of have bigger rooms and longer dungeons, but they're really not that bad even then. The enemies are on the screen, so you can avoid them if you're quick enough. I do wish they made the enemies avoid you if you were way over leveled, but they'll come charging at you even if they'll hit you for 1 damage. Battles were much faster this time, due to them being able to be sped up 3 times faster. It was so much faster that I was able to beat Lunar 1 in 17 hours, when it normally takes about 25 hours. And 20 hours for Lunar 2, down from 30 hours usually. It's shocking how much time I actually spent in fights in the past. I had no idea till I played the remakes. The fights are all based on range, and how far certain monsters can walk to you, or how far you can to them. The attacks that the monsters do on you are often based on position, so you're going to want to spread out your team to have minimal damage. You'll go from town to town upgrading weapons and armor. For some reason, Lunar 2 doesn't show what advantages in your stats there are when you buy equipment. They have a green arrow for increase and red for decreases. Why do they have to be so cryptic with this? Lunar 1 would show you the stats that would change. Why not change this for the remaster? They fixed the inventory system in the first game. How about fixing this in the second game? Lunar 2 still has an epilogue, which I'm sure is not a surprise, but they kind of hide it. When they beat the game, it asks you to save and then kicks you back to the screen to let you select one of the Lunar games, and if you want to play the remastered version or not. If you've never played the second game before, it's very possible you wouldn't know there was a 2 to 3 hour epilogue after the game. When you click on Lunar 2, it'll just have a menu option for the epilogue, so it's no longer just clicking on the save file. The voices were all recast for this version, and I thought they were fine. I didn't find any of the new voices bad at all. I do miss the original voice actor for Galleon, but the new one does an okay job. I think Zophar's voice actor is definitely one of the standouts. I think their take on the character had a different feel to it, at times menacing but also understanding a little. One of the biggest letdowns was the lack of the end of the game outtakes. It was in the Sega CD version and the PS1 version, where you could hear the voice actors screwing up their lines in funny ways. It was always something to look forward to at the end of both of these games, and neither one of the remakes had it, and that was just a bummer. Lunar Remastered Collection was a lot of fun. I hadn't played Lunar 2 in about 10 years. I had played Lunar 1 about 5 years ago on the Apple platform. I do wish that they had spent more time on the second game, as the first game has had plenty of fixes over the years. I was still very happy to be able to easily replay them again. Now this is normally $49.99, and it's totally worth buying. At $25 a piece, it's a steal for two really fun role-playing games. The characters were enjoyable to be around, and often really funny, and overall it's a very light-hearted game, and I definitely think it's worth a buy.